Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Prometheus, watching the swirling blue vortex of hyperspace fade into the star-filled void. 3 months had passed since humanity received the Galactic Council's invitation to join their peaceful confederation of civilized species. What they didn't know was that humans came from what the galaxy classified as a Class 3 death world. Earth scored higher on the danger scale than any planet that had ever produced sentient life. Most council races evolved on gentle worlds with stable climates, herbivorous wildlife, and natural resources that practically harvested themselves. The idea that intelligence could emerge from a planet where everything tried to kill everything else seemed impossible to them. The Council's peaceful philosophy had worked for over 10,000 years. Their member species solved conflicts through discussion, traded fairly, and explored the galaxy with scientific curiosity rather than conquest. War was so foreign to them that they had no word for it in galactic standard. The closest translation was aggressive disagreement. Sarah's crew represented humanity's first diplomatic mission to the Council homeworld of Nexus Prime. Her ship carried artists, scientists, philosophers, and diplomats. They were humanity's best and brightest, carefully chosen to make a good first impression. What the Council didn't realize was that even humanity's most peaceful representatives were products of a world that had forged them in violence. Dr. Marcus Webb, the mission's lead xenobiologist, approached Sarah with a concerned expression. His tablet displayed preliminary scans of Nexus Prime's ecosystem. "Captain, I'm seeing some disturbing readings from the planet below. The biodiversity is incredibly low, almost artificially low." Sarah frowned as she reviewed the data. Nexus Prime hosted the galaxy's most advanced civilization, yet its forest contained maybe a dozen species of animals. Earth's rainforest held thousands of species in a single square kilometer. Maybe they're just really good at conservation? "That's what worries me," Marcus replied. "Look at these atmospheric readings. The oxygen levels are perfect for their physiology, but there's no natural variation, no seasonal changes, no weather patterns that would stress the ecosystem. It's like the entire planet is a controlled environment." Before Sarah could respond, their communications officer announced an incoming transmission from Nexus Prime. The main screen flickered to life, revealing a tall, elegant being with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. Its movements were graceful and deliberate, like a dancer performing each gesture. "Greetings, beings of Earth." The alien spoke in perfect English, its voice melodic and calm. "I am Ambassador Kelos of the Valerian delegation. We welcome you to our peaceful corner of the galaxy. Please follow the provided flight path to our orbital station. We have prepared accommodations that should suit your physiological needs." Sarah stepped forward. "Thank you, Ambassador Kelos. We're honored by your invitation and look forward to learning about your civilization." As the transmission ended, Sarah noticed something odd. Throughout the entire conversation, Ambassador Kelos had never once looked directly at her. Its gaze had remained fixed on a point just above her shoulder. She'd encountered similar behavior in prey animals on Earth. The UES Prometheus docked at Nexus Prime's orbital station without incident. The structure was a marvel of engineering, built from some kind of translucent material that seemed to bend light in impossible ways. Everything was curved and organic-looking, with no sharp edges or angles anywhere. The welcoming committee that greeted them was equally impressive. Representatives from a dozen different species waited in the docking bay, each more exotic than the last. There were the tall, graceful Valerians like Ambassador Kelos, the short and stocky Gorvani with their rock-like skin, and the ethereal Luminari who seemed to glow with their own inner light. What struck Sarah immediately was how they all moved. Every gesture was slow and predictable. They announced their intentions before moving, asked permission before approaching, and maintained careful distances from each other. It was like watching a carefully choreographed dance designed to avoid any possibility of conflict. Dr. Amelia Torres, the mission's anthropologist, whispered to Sarah, "Captain, this behavior pattern is fascinating. They're displaying classic submissive social signals. Look how they keep their hands visible, avoid sudden movements, and speak in those calm, measured tones." Sarah nodded, beginning to understand. These beings had evolved on worlds so peaceful that aggression had been bred out of them entirely. They were prey species who had never learned to be anything else. The tour of the station revealed the extent of their pacifist nature. There were no locks on any doors, no security systems, no weapons of any kind. The concept of theft or violence was so foreign to them that they had never developed defenses against it. Their entire civilization was built on trust and cooperation. During the formal dinner that evening, Sarah sat between Ambassador Kalos and a Gorvani scientist named Thorek. The conversation was pleasant but revealing. When Sarah mentioned humanity's history of warfare, the entire table fell silent. Warfare? Ambassador Kalos repeated the word slowly, as if tasting something bitter. You mean your species has engaged in aggressive disagreements that resulted in physical harm? Well, yes, Sarah replied carefully. Throughout our history, different groups of humans have fought over resources, territory, and ideology. It's how we learned to solve problems and push the boundaries of technology. The aliens exchanged glances that Sarah was beginning to recognize as expressions of deep concern. Thorek spoke up, his rocky features somehow managing to convey worry. But how do you maintain social cohesion if your species is capable of intentional violence? How do you trust each other? Dr. Elena Vasquez, the mission's historian, leaned forward. We've learned to channel our aggressive instincts into productive outlets. Competition drives innovation. The desire to protect what we love motivates us to become stronger. Our capacity for violence is also our capacity for defending the innocent. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah realized they had just revealed something that terrified these gentle beings. Humanity wasn't just capable of violence. They had turned it into a virtue. Ambassador Kilos's voice was barely above a whisper when he finally spoke. We must convene an emergency session of the Council. This changes everything we thought we knew about your species. As the evening ended and the humans were escorted to their quarters, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they had just crossed a line they couldn't uncross. The galaxy's peaceful civilization had just learned that their newest potential members were apex predators who had conquered their own world through strength and cunning. What they didn't know yet was that this was only the beginning. Humanity's true nature was about to be tested in ways none of them could imagine. The emergency council session convened within hours of the dinner. Captain Sarah Chen and her diplomatic team were invited to observe from a special viewing area, though the tension in the vast amphitheater was thick enough to cut with a knife. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the curved seats, their conversations creating a nervous buzz that seemed to vibrate through the organic walls. High Counselor Zephys, a luminary whose body glowed with shifting patterns of blue and gold light, called for order. The ancient being's voice carried across the chamber without technological amplification. A gift of their species evolved vocal cords. Fellow beings of peace, Zephys began, we gather in unprecedented circumstances. For the first time in our recorded history, we have encountered a species that has not only survived on a death world, but has thrived through what they call warfare. We must decide how to proceed. Ambassador Kalos stood to address the assembly. His usual grace seemed strained, and Sarah noticed his hands trembling slightly. Honored counselors, after extensive discussions with the human delegation, I must report that their capacity for violence exceeds our worst projections. They speak of it not as a last resort, but as a tool for progress. A ripple of fear passed through the assembled delegates. The crystalline architects, beings of living mineral who communicated through harmonic vibrations, created a sound like wind chimes in a storm. The ethereal collective, gaseous beings contained in sophisticated environmental suits, began cycling through rapid color changes that Sarah's translator indicated as extreme distress. Dr. Elena Vasquez leaned over to whisper to Sarah, Captain, I think we need to clarify a few things before this gets out of hand. Sarah nodded and stood, her movement causing hundreds of alien eyes to focus on her with the intensity of prey animals spotting a predator. High Counselor Zephys, if I may address the assembly. The request sent another wave of nervous energy through the chamber. In 10,000 years of council history, no outside species had ever spoken during an emergency session. But these were unprecedented times. You may speak, Captain Chen, Zephys replied, though the patterns in their luminous body had shifted to what Sarah was learning, indicated deep concern. Sarah stepped to the central speaking platform, acutely aware that every move she made was being analyzed for signs of threat. Honored members of the Galactic Council, I believe there has been a misunderstanding about humanity's nature. Yes, we have a history of conflict, but we also have an even longer history of cooperation, art, and scientific discovery. She gestured to her crew. Dr. Webb has spent his life studying how to preserve ecosystems. Dr. Torres dedicates her work to understanding how different cultures can peacefully coexist. These are not the actions of a purely violent species. A new voice spoke from the assembly. Counselor Vrax of the hive mind Nexari approached the speaking platform. The insectoid being's compound eyes reflected the chamber's soft lighting, like scattered diamonds. But Captain Chen, your species has developed weapons capable of destroying entire planets. Your historical records speak of conflicts that killed millions. How do we know you won't turn these tendencies toward us? The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Sarah realized that no amount of diplomatic language would overcome their fundamental fear. These beings had never faced a real threat in their evolutionary history. They couldn't understand that strength could exist alongside compassion. Because, Sarah said quietly, every human here volunteered to leave their families and travel across the galaxy to meet you in peace. We could have remained on Earth isolated and safe. Instead, we chose to reach out to you. That choice defines us more than our capacity for conflict. Before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. The soft, organic lighting shifted to a harsh red that hurt the humans' eyes. Emergency broadcasts echoed through the chamber in dozens of languages simultaneously. Unknown vessels approaching Nexus Prime, the automated system announced. Configuration suggests hostile intent. All civilians report to designated safe areas immediately. The council chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates from species that had never experienced danger began crying out in languages the translation systems couldn't process fast enough. Many simply froze in place, their evolutionary programming having no response for genuine threat. Sarah's training kicked in instantly. She turned to her crew. Webb, get to the sensor arrays and figure out what we're dealing with. Torres helped coordinate the civilian evacuation. Vasquez, find their defense systems. She paused, realizing the flaw in her orders. Wait, do they even have defense systems? Ambassador Kellis overheard her question, his pale blue face having gone even paler. Defense systems? We have never needed such things. Our philosophy of peace has protected us for millennia. Through the station's transparent walls, Sarah could see dark shapes emerging from hyperspace. The ships were angular and aggressive, bristling with weapon arrays that even her untrained eye could recognize as military hardware. Whatever species had built them, they clearly didn't share the Council's peaceful philosophy. Dr. Webb's voice crackled over the communication system. Captain, I'm reading 12 large vessels and at least 50 smaller attack craft. Their energy signatures don't match any known Council species. These aren't explorers or traders. High Counselor Zephys approached Sarah, their luminous form flickering with patterns she'd never seen before. Captain Chen, we have no experience with such situations. Our species have forgotten how to fight, if we ever knew at all. What do we do? Sarah looked around the chamber at hundreds of alien faces turned toward her in desperate hope. These beings who had feared humanity's violent nature were now looking to those same humans for salvation. The irony wasn't lost on her. First, we need to know what they want, Sarah said, shifting into military command mode. Open a communication channel. The main display activated, showing the approaching fleet in terrifying detail. The ships were clearly built for war, with armor plating, weapon ports, and designs that prioritized function over the aesthetic beauty favored by Council species. A new signal cut through their communications. The face that appeared on screen was reptilian, with scaled green skin and yellow eyes that held an intelligence as cold as space itself. When it spoke, its voice carried the confidence of absolute superiority. Peaceful citizens of the Galactic Council, the being said, its translator rendering the words with a mocking tone. I am War Commander Salix of the Voidstalker Fleet. We have observed your pathetic civilization for centuries, waiting for the right moment to claim your resources and territory. Your soft, defenseless worlds will make excellent breeding grounds for our expanding empire. The transmission cut off, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. In seconds, the Council's 10,000-year era of peace had ended, or had come to their corner of the galaxy, brought by a species that had evolved to be everything the Council races were not. Sarah felt something awakening in her chest, not fear, but anticipation. Her species had been shaped by conflict, forged in the crucible of survival on a world that had tried to kill them every day. These gentle beings around her were about to learn why evolution had made humans into apex predators. "Hi, Counselor," Sarah said, her voice carrying a new edge that made several nearby aliens step back involuntarily. "I think it's time you learned what humans do when someone threatens the innocent." The transformation in the humans was immediate and terrifying to watch. Captain Sarah Chen's diplomatic smile vanished, replaced by the cold focus of a predator analyzing threats. Her crew moved with sudden purpose, their earlier careful politeness abandoned as they shifted into combat mode. "Webb, I need a complete tactical analysis of their fleet composition," Sarah barked into her communicator. "Vasquez, find me the station's structural weak points. If we're going to defend this place, I need to know what we're working with. Torres, get me a list of every ship in this system and their capabilities." The transformation wasn't just behavioral. The aliens watched in fascination and horror as the humans' bodies seemed to change. Their pupils dilated, their breathing became controlled and efficient, and their movements gained a fluid economy that spoke of deadly precision. Dr. Marcus Webb, who had been gently cataloging plant samples hours earlier, now analyzed enemy weapon systems with the detached efficiency of a military engineer. Ambassador Kilos approached Sarah cautiously. "Captain, what is happening to your people? You seem different." Sarah didn't look away from the tactical display her crew was assembling. "We're remembering what we are, Ambassador. Your species evolved to avoid conflict. Mine evolved to win it. The enemy fleet was maintaining position just outside Nexus Prime's orbital defense grid, though calling it a defense grid was generous. The Council's idea of planetary protection consisted of early warning sensors and polite requests for hostile forces to reconsider their actions." Dr. Torres returned with her analysis. "Captain, this system has 47 civilian vessels, mostly research ships and cargo haulers. The largest military presence is a single Council peacekeeping vessel, but according to their specifications, it's designed for rescue operations and crowd control, not combat." "What about the UES Prometheus?" Sarah asked. "Still the most heavily armed ship in the system," Torres replied grimly. "And that's not saying much." War Commander Salix's fleet began moving toward Nexus Prime, their approach calculated to maximize psychological impact. The reptilian ships moved in predatory formations that reminded Sarah uncomfortably of pack hunters surrounding prey. High Counselor Zephys approached the human group, their luminous form flickering with patterns of distress. "Captain Chen, we have received the invaders' demands. They want complete surrender of all Council territories, the enslavement of our populations, and the conversion of our worlds into breeding colonies for their species." The casual cruelty of the demands sent a wave of horrified murmurs through the assembled delegates. These beings had lived in peace for so long that the concept of such deliberate evil was almost incomprehensible to them. Sarah felt something ancient and primal stirring in her chest. Throughout human history, there had always been those who preyed on the innocent, and there had always been those willing to stand against them. Today, she represented both humanity's capacity for violence and their dedication to protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. "Counselor Zephys," Sarah said, her voice carrying a new authority that made the alien step back instinctively. "I need you to authorize the release of our ship and give us full access to your sensor networks." "But Captain, your single vessel cannot possibly stand against an entire fleet," Zephys protested. Sarah's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Counselor, you're thinking like prey. I'm thinking like a predator." The UES Prometheus undocked from the orbital station with a grace that belied its deadly purpose. As it moved toward the enemy fleet, Sarah's crew worked with an efficiency that amazed their Council observers. Every human seemed to know exactly what their crewmates were thinking, coordinating complex maneuvers without apparent communication. "This is unprecedented," Ambassador Kalos whispered to another delegate. "Their entire behavioral pattern has shifted. They're operating as a single organism focused on violence. What the aliens were witnessing was humanity's pack-hunting instinct in action, evolved from persistence hunters who had brought down prey many times their size through coordination and determination. Humans had learned to function as a collective intelligence when facing threats. On the Prometheus's bridge, Sarah studied the enemy formation with the patience of an apex predator. "Dr. Webb, what's your assessment of their ship design?" "Pure brute force approach, Captain," Webb replied, his academic demeanor now focused on military analysis. "Heavy armor, Powerful weapons, but they're built for intimidation rather than tactical flexibility. They expect their enemies to fold immediately, which means they've never faced real resistance, Sarah concluded. Torres, what's their likely combat doctrine? Based on their formation and approach pattern, I'd say they rely on overwhelming firepower and shock tactics. They probably haven't fought anyone who could fight back in centuries. Sarah nodded. The Voidstalkers had evolved to be bullies, successful only because they had never encountered true predators. They were about to learn the difference between intimidating herbivores and fighting something that had evolved to kill. Open a channel to War Commander Salix, Sarah ordered. The reptilian face appeared on screen, yellow eyes glittering with amusement. Ah, the representatives of the new species. Have you come to surrender your pathetic vessel? We might allow some of you to live as entertainment. Sarah's expression didn't change. War Commander Salix, I am Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earthship Prometheus. I'm giving you one opportunity to withdraw from this system. Salix's laughter was like the hiss of escaping gas. One small ship against my entire fleet? Your species must be even more primitive than these council weaklings. We will enjoy breaking you. I thought you'd say that, Sarah replied calmly. Just remember, you were warned. The channel closed and Sarah turned to her crew. The transformation was complete now. These were no longer diplomats and scientists. They were warriors who had inherited 10,000 years of human military evolution, and they were about to remind the galaxy why Earth had forged them into the ultimate survivors. All hands, battle stations, Sarah announced. Today we show the galaxy what Deathworlders do when someone threatens the innocent. The enemy fleet began their attack run, confident in their overwhelming advantage. They had no idea they were about to face a species that had learned to fight everything from saber-toothed tigers to each other, and had never learned the meaning of surrender. The battle began with the Voidstalkers doing exactly what Sarah expected. They tried to intimidate their enemy into submission. War Commander Salix's fleet formed a massive wall of ships, their weapons charging with obvious displays of power meant to paralyze their opponents with fear. It might have worked on any other species in the galaxy. The Council races watched from their orbital station in terror as energy readings spiked across the enemy formation. These beings had never seen military formations designed for maximum psychological impact, and the sight of so much concentrated destructive power left many of them unable to function. But the humans aboard the UES Prometheus had a different reaction entirely. As the enemy ships powered their weapons, Sarah's crew smiled. Captain, Dr. Webb reported from the sensor station, they're broadcasting on all frequencies. Looks like they want everyone to see this. Of course they do, Sarah replied. They're performers, not soldiers. Torres, what's our stealth system status? Fully operational and completely beyond their detection capabilities, Torres answered. Their sensors are designed to track the energy signatures of Council ships. They have no idea how to look for Earth technology. The Prometheus had been built using principles that the peaceful Council races had never needed to develop. Human ships were designed to be invisible, fast, and deadly, while Council vessels announced their presence and intentions clearly. Human ships were built to strike without warning and disappear before the enemy could respond. Beginning evasive maneuvers, Sarah announced. Remember, we're not trying to win a fair fight. We're trying to survive long enough to teach these bullies a lesson they'll never forget. The Prometheus vanished from the enemy sensors like a ghost, its stealth systems utilizing technology that no other species in the galaxy had developed. The Council races had never needed to hide from anything, so the concept of cloaking devices was foreign to them. The Voidstalkers, who relied on brute force, had never bothered to develop detection systems for enemies they couldn't see. War Commander Salix's voice echoed across the communication channels, now carrying a note of confusion. Where is the human vessel? Have they fled like cowards? From the orbital station, Ambassador Kelos watched in amazement as the human ship seemed to flicker in and out of existence on their sensors. How are they doing that? Our technology should be able to detect any vessel in this system. High Counselor Zephys's luminous form pulsed with patterns of wonder and fear. They are using principles of warfare that we never imagined. They fight like shadows, like the predators from our oldest nightmares. The first attack came without warning. The Prometheus materialized directly behind the enemy formation's flagship, its weapons already charged and targeting the ship's most vulnerable systems. Sarah had studied the enemy ship designs during their approach and identified critical weaknesses that their builders had never considered. "Fire," Sarah commanded. The human weapons were different from anything the galaxy had seen. While council races had developed energy weapons designed to disable rather than destroy, and the Void Stalkers used crude but powerful blasters meant to intimidate, human weapons were precise instruments of destruction, designed to kill efficiently and without waste. The enemy flagship's shield generators exploded in a chain reaction that sent ripples of destruction across its hull. Before the other ships could react, the Prometheus had vanished again, leaving the crippled vessel spinning helplessly in space. "Impossible," Salix roared over the communications. "How did they penetrate our shield so easily?" What the war commander didn't understand was that humans had spent centuries fighting other humans. Every defensive system Earth had ever developed had been created specifically to stop human weapons, and every human weapon had been designed to penetrate human defenses. The result was an endless arms race that had produced technology far more sophisticated than anything the galaxy's peaceful or brutally simple species had imagined. Dr. Webb, monitoring the enemy fleet's response, reported with scientific detachment, "Captain, they're panicking. Their formation is breaking apart as individual commanders try to protect their own ships." "Predictable," Sarah replied. "They're bullies, not soldiers. They've never faced real resistance, so they have no experience maintaining discipline under pressure." The second attack targeted the fleet's communication arrays, using precision strikes that would have been impossible for larger, more obvious weapons. The Prometheus systematically destroyed the enemy's ability to coordinate their response. Within minutes, what had been an organized invasion force became a collection of isolated ships trying desperately to find an enemy they couldn't see. "Their command structure is collapsing," Torres reported. "Individual ships are starting to break formation and flee," but Sarah wasn't finished. The galaxy's peaceful races were watching this battle, and the lesson needed to be clear and unforgettable. The Void Stalkers represented every bully and predator who might threaten the innocent in the future. Today's demonstration would determine whether the galaxy's gentle species would live in fear or safety. "Target their weapon systems," Sarah ordered. "I want them alive but helpless." The Prometheus danced through the enemy formation like a wraith, appearing just long enough to cripple another ship before vanishing again. The human ship's movements were fluid and unpredictable, following no pattern the enemy could anticipate or counter. It was the difference between a choreographed dance and the improvised movements of a natural predator. On the orbital station, the council representatives watched in stunned silence as a single human ship systematically dismantled a fleet that had seemed invincible minutes earlier. The transformation in their perception of humanity was immediate and profound. "They are not just capable of violence," whispered Councillor Vrax of the Nixari. "They have turned violence into an art form." Ambassador Kalos's voice trembled as he spoke. "We feared them because they had known war. We should have been grateful that they had learned to control it." The battle reached its climax when the Prometheus appeared directly in front of War Commander Salix's personal command ship. This time the human vessel didn't attack immediately. Instead, Sarah opened a communication channel. "War Commander Salix," Sarah said, her voice carrying the calm confidence of absolute victory. "You came here expecting to find helpless prey. Instead, you found apex predators. Your fleet is crippled, your command structure is broken, and your ships are defenseless. I could destroy you all right now." Salix's yellow eyes were wide with something the reptilian had never experienced before: genuine fear. What are you?" Sarah's smile was sharp and cold. "We are what evolution creates when everything on a planet tries to kill you every single day for millions of years. We are what happens when a species learns that the strong protect the weak, not prey upon them. We are humans and we do not surrender." The silence that followed carried across the entire system, heard by every ship, every station, and every being who had witnessed the impossible victory of one small vessel against an entire invasion fleet. War Commander Salix's surrender came not as words, but as a fundamental collapse of everything his species represented. The reptilian's confident posture crumbled as he stared at the tactical display, showing his once mighty fleet reduced to drifting hulks. His yellow eyes, which had gleamed with predatory satisfaction minutes earlier, now darted around frantically like a cornered animal. We yield," Salix whispered, his translator barely picking up the words. Spare my crews. We will withdraw from your territory. Sarah's response carried the weight of 10,000 years of human warfare. Commander, you misunderstand the situation. This isn't our territory. We're guests here. These are the beings you came to enslave and slaughter. It's not our forgiveness you should be asking for. The communication channel remained open as Sarah connected the call to the Council's orbital station. High Counselor Zephys appeared on screen, their luminous form pulsing with patterns of amazement and newfound strength. War Commander Salix, Zephys said, their voice carrying an authority that hadn't existed an hour earlier. Your fleet attacked a peaceful system with the intention of committing genocide against innocent beings. By what right do you ask for mercy? The irony wasn't lost on anyone watching. The galaxy's most peaceful beings were now in a position to pass judgment on its most violent aggressors, protected by warriors who understood both strength and compassion. Salix's response revealed the fundamental flaw in his species' philosophy. We are strong. We have the right of conquest. The weak exist to serve the strong. No, Sarah interrupted, her voice cutting through his protests like a blade. The strong exist to protect the weak. That's what separates civilization from barbarism. That's what makes us human. What followed was unprecedented in galactic history. Captain Sarah Chen, representing a species that had been considered potentially dangerous just hours earlier, began coordinating the largest prisoner-of-war operation the galaxy had ever seen. The humans, despite being vastly outnumbered, took complete control of the situation with an efficiency that left both allies and enemies speechless. Dr. Webb coordinated medical assistance for wounded Void Stalker crews, treating enemy soldiers with the same care he would show to friends. Dr. Torres organized the processing of prisoners, ensuring they were treated according to standards of dignity that their own species had never shown to others. Dr. Vasquez began documenting war crimes and gathering evidence for what would become the galaxy's first military tribunal. The Council representatives watched in fascination as the humans demonstrated something their peaceful philosophies had never contemplated: the ability to be both utterly ruthless in battle and completely compassionate in victory. Ambassador Kilos approached Sarah as she coordinated the operation from the Prometheus's bridge. Captain Chen, I must ask, how do your people balance such contradictions? You fight with a ferocity that terrifies us, yet you treat your defeated enemies with more kindness than they showed to those they attacked. Sarah paused in her work, considering the question carefully. Ambassador, on Earth we have a saying, speak softly and carry a big stick. We prefer peace, but we're prepared for war. We hope for the best in others, but we're ready for the worst. The universe is a dangerous place, and sometimes good people need to do terrible things to protect innocent lives. The processing of the Void Stalker fleet revealed the extent of their crimes across the galaxy. Ship after ship contained evidence of slavery, genocide, and systematic destruction of peaceful civilizations. These weren't warriors in any honorable sense. They were predators who had grown fat and lazy, feeding on beings unable to defend themselves. Captain, Dr. Vasquez reported, we're finding records of at least 30 different species that have been completely wiped out by these creatures. They've been operating in the Outer Rim for centuries, targeting isolated worlds that couldn't call for help. The news sent waves of horror through the Council representatives. Their peaceful corner of the galaxy had been surrounded by genocide, and they had never known because none of the victims had survived to warn them. High Counselor Zephys called an emergency session to address the revelations. This time Captain Chen was invited not as an observer, but as an honored guest whose words would carry the weight of Council law. Fellow beings, Zephys announced to the assembly, we have learned that our peace was built on ignorance. While we debated philosophy and explored the gentle mysteries of the universe, entire civilizations were being destroyed in the darkness between stars. We were safe only because we had not yet been found. The impact of this revelation was profound. Species that had lived for millennia without fear suddenly understood how fragile their civilization had been. They had survived not because of their peaceful nature, but because they had been lucky. Sarah stood to address the assembly, and this time there was no fear in the eyes that turned toward her. Instead, she saw something she recognized from Earth's history: the look of people who had learned the difference between peace and pacifism. Honored counselors, Sarah began, humanity requests permission to establish a joint defense force with the Council. Our species brings knowledge of warfare and protection. Your species bring wisdom, compassion, and the moral framework that makes civilization worth defending. The proposal sparked immediate debate. Some species worried about introducing military concepts to their peaceful society. Others argued that humanity's violent nature might corrupt their values. But the evidence of the Voidstalker atrocities made the choice clear. Councillor Vrax of the Nexari spoke for many when she said, "We have learned today that good intentions are not enough to protect the innocent. Strength without wisdom leads to tyranny, but wisdom without strength leads to extinction. Perhaps it is time we learn to balance both." The vote was not unanimous, but it was decisive. The Galactic Council authorized the formation of the first military force in their 10,000-year history, with humans serving as military advisors and trainers. The peaceful species would learn to defend themselves, while the humans would learn to temper their warrior instincts with the Council's moral wisdom. War Commander Salix and his surviving crews were sentenced to life imprisonment, their ships to be studied and their weapons destroyed. But perhaps more importantly, the galaxy's peaceful species had learned a lesson that would reshape their civilization. As the emergency session concluded, Ambassador Kelos approached Sarah with a question that would echo through galactic history. "Captain Chen," he said quietly, "your species has shown us that we have been naive about the nature of the universe. But I must ask, what other threats are out there that we do not yet know about?" Sarah's expression grew serious as she considered the vast dark spaces between stars. "Ambassador, the Voidstalkers were just one fleet from one aggressive species. If they've been operating for centuries, there are probably others. The galaxy is a big place and not all of it is peaceful." The implications of her words settled over the council like a cold wind. Their era of innocent peace was over, but perhaps something better could take its place. A peace protected by strength, wisdom guided by power, and compassion backed by the will to defend it. 6 months later, the galaxy had transformed in ways that would have been unimaginable before humanity's arrival. The Nexus Prime Orbital Station, once a peaceful research facility, had become the headquarters of the newly formed Galactic Defense Initiative. The elegant curved architecture remained, but now it housed training facilities, strategic planning centers, and communication arrays that connected a growing network of defensive installations across Council space. Captain Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck overlooking the main training bay, watching something that would have been impossible just months earlier. Valerian diplomats practiced close-quarters combat alongside Gorvani engineers, while Luminari scientists learned to coordinate military communications with crystalline architects. The transformation wasn't just physical, it was psychological. Dr. Marcus Webb approached, carrying a data pad filled with progress reports. "Captain, the integration is proceeding faster than our most optimistic projections. The Council species are adapting to military concepts with remarkable speed." Sarah nodded, watching a group of Nexari hive mind drones execute a perfect flanking maneuver against their training opponents. "They were never weak, Marcus. They just never had reason to develop these skills. Give them motivation and proper training, and they're learning to be formidable." The motivation had come in the form of regular intelligence reports from the Outer Rim. Human reconnaissance ships, operating beyond the traditional boundaries of Council space, had discovered evidence of at least a dozen other aggressive species similar to the Voidstalkers. The galaxy was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Ambassador Kelos entered the observation deck, his movements now carrying a confidence that hadn't existed during their first meeting. The gentle diplomat had become one of the most effective military coordinators in the defense initiative, his natural grace translating surprisingly well to tactical thinking. "Captain Chen," Kelos said, "we've received disturbing reports from the Outer Veil sector. Long-range sensors have detected a massive fleet movement. The energy signatures don't match any known species." Sarah frowned as she reviewed the intelligence data. The approaching fleet was enormous, easily 10 times the size of the Voidstalker force they had defeated. More concerning was their movement pattern, which suggested a level of military sophistication far beyond anything they had encountered. "How long until they reach Council space?" Sarah asked. "At their current speed, approximately 3 weeks, Kelos replied. "Captain, this fleet is larger than anything we're prepared to handle. Even with our new defensive capabilities, we may not be able to stop them." Sarah studied the tactical projections, her mind racing through possibilities. The Council's transformation had been remarkable, but 3 weeks wasn't enough time to complete their military evolution. They would need something more than conventional tactics to survive what was coming. Ambassador, I need you to call an emergency council session and get me a direct line to Earth. It's time to introduce the galaxy to the rest of humanity. The emergency session that convened that evening included representatives not just from Council space, but from human colonies across the galaxy. For the first time, the peaceful aliens saw the true scope of human civilization. Captain Chen had been just the beginning. Admiral Marcus Thompson materialized on the main display via quantum entanglement communication, his weathered face showing the experience of decades commanding Earth's deep space fleets. Behind him, Sarah could see the bridge of the UES Leviathan, humanity's newest and most powerful warship. Council representatives, Admiral Thompson began, his voice carrying the authority of humanity's senior military command. Captain Chen has briefed us on your situation. The approaching fleet represents a species we've encountered before, the Hegemony Collective. They're not raiders like the Void Stalkers. They're conquerors who seek to assimilate or destroy every other form of intelligent life. The news sent ripples of fear through the assembly. High Counselor Zephys's luminous patterns shifted to colors that indicated deep concern. Admiral Thompson, what are our chances of survival against such a force? Alone, minimal, Thompson replied bluntly. But you're not alone anymore. Humanity has been preparing for threats like this since we first left Earth. We've been building ships, training crews, and developing strategies specifically designed to handle overwhelming odds. What followed was the largest military mobilization in galactic history. Human fleets that had been scattered across the outer rim began converging on Council space, bringing with them technologies and strategies that even Captain Chen had never seen. The peaceful species watched in amazement as humanity revealed the true extent of their military capabilities. The humans hadn't just been exploring the galaxy, they had been preparing for war on a scale that dwarfed anything the Council races had imagined. Ships that could phase in and out of normal space, weapons that could manipulate gravity itself, and defensive systems that turned entire star systems into impregnable fortresses. But perhaps more importantly, the humans brought something the galaxy had never seen before, the ability to coordinate different species into a unified fighting force. They understood that the Council race's diversity was a strength, not a weakness if properly utilized. Dr. Elena Vasquez presented the integrated battle plan to the combined Council and human command staff. The Hegemony Collective expects to face isolated, terrified civilizations that will surrender or flee. Instead, they're going to encounter a coordinated defense that uses each species' natural abilities in ways they've never experienced. The plan was audacious. Baelarian ships would serve as communication relays, their natural grace allowing them to maintain coordination in the chaos of battle. Gorvani vessels would anchor defensive positions, their rock-like durability making them perfect for absorbing enemy fire. Luminary ships would provide electronic warfare capabilities, their energy manipulation abilities perfect for disrupting enemy systems. And the humans would do what they did best: hunt. The Battle of the Nexus began when the Hegemony fleet arrived to find not the helpless prey they expected, but a coordinated defense force that had been preparing for their arrival for weeks. The opening moves set the tone for everything that followed. The enemy fleet, confident in their superiority, advanced in a massive wall formation designed to overwhelm any resistance through sheer firepower. It was a tactic that had worked against every species they had encountered for millennia. It lasted exactly 7 minutes against the combined human Council force. Human ships phased out of normal space directly inside the enemy formation, while Council vessels coordinated attacks with a precision that no single species could have achieved alone. The Hegemony's massive ships, designed to intimidate and destroy static targets, found themselves unable to track enemies that fought like a single organism with dozens of different capabilities. Captain Chen, now commanding an integrated human Council task force, watched the battle unfold from the bridge of the UES Prometheus. The peaceful species she had met just months earlier were now fighting with a skill and determination that would have made any human proud. Captain, Dr. Webb reported from his sensor station, the enemy command ship is trying to retreat. They're broadcasting surrender requests on all frequencies. Sarah smiled as she watched the galaxy's newest apex predators, a combined force of former prey species and Deathworld survivors complete their victory. Accept their surrender, Dr. Webb, but make sure they understand the terms. The surrender negotiations that followed established a new precedent in galactic law. For the first time in recorded history, an aggressive species was not just defeated but fundamentally transformed. The Hegemony Collective would be integrated into Council society, their warrior culture redirected toward protection rather than conquest. As the combined fleet returned to Nexus Prime in victory, Ambassador Kalo stood beside Captain Chen on the observation deck. The gentle being who had once feared humanity's violent nature now understood the difference between destruction and protection. "Captain," Kalo said quietly, "we feared your species because we thought violence was your nature. We understand now that violence is your tool. Your nature is to protect those who cannot protect themselves." Sarah nodded as she watched the diverse fleet surrounding them. Former pacifists and reformed conquerors, Deathworld survivors and peaceful philosophers, all united in the defense of civilization. "Ambassador, humanity learned long ago that the universe doesn't care about good intentions, but it does respond to good people who are willing to fight for what's right." The galaxy had learned that peace wasn't the absence of conflict, it was conflict resolved in favor of those who deserved protection, and sometimes that required predators who hunted not for prey but for justice. The age of innocent peace was over. The age of protected peace had begun.